Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome again. We will continue with the internal features of the midbrain. As I explained in my last lecture that there are some structural differences between the upper half and lower half of the midbrain. Some features are same throughout the extent of midbrain, extending from upper to its lower end. For example, crus cerebri, and second, the substantia nigra. But these two levels of the midbrain, that is at the level of superior colliculus and inferior colliculus, there are marked structural differences in the tegmentum and tectum of the midbrain. So in this lecture we will study first the internal features of the midbrain at the level of superior colliculus or upper half of the midbrain, and then we will switch on to the internal features of the midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus or lower half of the midbrain. Lateral view of the midbrain showing superior colliculus and inferior colliculus. So this is section through the midbrain at the level of superior colliculus. And we will study the midbrain lower part section cut at the level of inferior colliculus. Now we will first cut a section of the midbrain at the level of superior colliculus or through the upper half of the midbrain. This is section through the midbrain at the level of superior colliculus. Then we will cut another section of the midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus. Now this diagram shows a cross section through the upper half of the midbrain, that is at the level of superior colliculus, and this is a section of the midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus or lower half of the midbrain. Now first of all, what is the structure of midbrain at the level of superior colliculus? Now, as I told you, each half of the midbrain is known as cerebral peduncle, which comprise of crus cerebri anteriorly. And behind the crus cerebri is substantia nigra. Crus cerebri, behind it is the substantia nigra. Still behind is the tegmentum, which in the middle is traversed by cerebral aqueduct. This cross section shows superior colliculi, one right and one left, right and left superior colliculi. Now, the crus cerebrus comprising of descending tracts, already we discussed in detail. Then there is substantia nigra, highly pigmented area of gray matter, already we discussed. No structural difference occur in case of crus cerebri and substantia nigra, whether it is upper half of the midbrain or lower half of the midbrain. Structure is same at both levels. Then in the middle of the tegmentum, it is crossed by cerebral aqueduct. Now the cerebral aqueduct is surrounded by a gray matter, known as the central gray matter. Central gray matter or periaqueductal gray matter. The cerebral aqueduct as I told you before, is lined by ependyma to its cerebrospinal fluid circulate, and it connects the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle. Then a layer of gray matter surrounds the cerebral aqueduct, known as the central gray matter or periaqueductal gray matter. Now, in the central gray matter, anterolateral to the cerebral aqueduct is the oculomotor nerve nucleus on each side. Oculomotor nerve nucleus. One right and one left. Located in the central gray matter, anterolateral to the cerebral aqueduct. Then in the again in the central gray matter, lateral to the cerebral aqueduct is the mesencephalic nucleus and tract of the trigeminal nerve on each side. Mesencephalic nucleus. And tract, sensory tract of fifth cranial nerve, of trigeminal nerve. Now the sensory nucleus of the trigeminal nerve needs some elaboration. Now this is a midbrain, front view of the midbrain, right and left crus cerebri. Then ventral view of the pons and the medulla oblongata. Which is continued as the spinal cord. Now, this is suppose middle line. Of brainstem and spinal cord. Now, sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve. It is an elongated nucleus which starts on the upper end of the midbrain and continue to descend through the pons, medulla oblongata, and even upper 2 or 3 segments of the spinal cord. Now this is sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve, an elongated nucleus. This is sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Then elongated nucleus, which starts from the upper end of the midbrain, traverses through the whole extent of midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, and upper 2 or 3 segments of the spinal cord. This motor nucleus of the trigeminal nerve also. Motor nucleus of trigeminal nerve is located only in the pons. Then sensory nucleus, an elongated nucleus, it is parallel with the sensory tract of trigeminal nerve, known as the sensory tract of trigeminal nerve. Sensory tract of trigeminal nerve. 5th cranial nerve. So parallel with the sensory nucleus is the sensory tract of trigeminal nerve. From this sensory tract, nerve fibers arise which enter into the different parts of the sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve. The motor nucleus is confined to the midbrain only. Now, this sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve, along with the sensory tract of trigeminal, traversing the midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, and upper 2 or 3 segments of spinal cord. Upper 2 or 3 spinal segments. Now, because the sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve, its different parts are in different portions of the brainstem and spinal cord, so they are differently named. Now, this part of the sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve, which is in the midbrain, is known as the mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Nucleus and sensory tract of trigeminal nerve. Now, this part of the sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve, which is in the pons, is known as the principal sensory nucleus. Trigeminal nerve. And this is the principal sensory nucleus and tract of the trigeminal nerve, which is in the pons. Then it continues into the medulla oblongata and upper 2 or 3 segments of the spinal cord. this part and the one which is the upper portion of the spinal cord is known as the medullary or spinal sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Medullary or spinal sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve. So these are the different parts of the sensory nucleus and tract of the trigeminal nerve. So because sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve is located at all levels of the midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata and upper 2 or 3 segments of the spinal cord, this nucleus will be present in cross sections of midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata and upper 2 or 3 segments of the spinal cord. Now I have shown the sensory nucleus and tract of trigeminal nerve on one side, and parallel to it here will be on the other side, which is not shown in the diagram. So if you cut a section of the spinal cord at the level of superior calculus in the central gray matter lateral to the cerebral aqueduct will be mesencephalic nucleus and tract of the trigeminal nerve. This part of the trigeminal nerve will be located here. Now here dorsal to the medial part of the substantia nigra in the midbrain at the level of superior calculus there are 2 nuclei, one on each side, known as the red nucleus. Nucleus rubra or red nucleus in the upper half of the midbrain at the level of superior calculus. Red nucleus or nucleus rubra this is known as red nucleus or nucleus rubra because it appear reddish or pinkish in color in life. if you, in a living subject, it is because of its high vascularity and iron content, it appears red in color. But in a specimen, if you cut a section, it will not appear red in color, but can easily be identified from the rest of the structure of the midbrain, and can easily can be seen. But in life, it appears red in color because of high vascularity. Now here, in front of the central gray matter, between the two red nuclei, there is a decussation. This is known as tegmental decussation. Tegmental decussation. Decussatio tegmentalis. Tegmental decussation, or decussatio tegmentalis. Decussation between nerve fibers. Now this decussation comprises of dorsal part and ventral part. This dorsal part is known as the decussatio tegmentalis. Decussatio tegmentalis posterior. And the one which is ventrally located is known as decussatio tegmentalis anterior. Decussatio tegmentalis posterior. Collectively known as the tegmental decussation or decussatio tegmentalis. So decussatio tegmentalis we divide into a dorsal part and a ventral part, posterior part and anterior part. Here is decussation of nerve fibers. Now, which nerve fibers decussate through the decussatio posterior? Two tracts decussate here. Tectobulbar and tectospinal tracts. Tectobulbar and tectospinal tracts. Through this tegmental decussation, dorsal part, ventral part, posterior part, that is called the decussatio tegmentalis posterior. Here there is decussation of two tracts, tectobulbar and tectospinal tracts. As their name indicate, tectobulbar arise from the tectum, region of superior colliculi. And the tectospinal tectobulbar from the tectum to the medulla oblongata, region of superior colliculi, and tectospinal tracts rises from the superior colliculi and descend to the spinal cord tectospinal tract. So these tracts decussate here in the decussatio tegmentalis posterior, and in front of it is decussatio tegmentalis anterior. Here there is again decussation of a tract, one tract known as the rubrospinal tract. Rubrospinal tract. So in the posterior tegmental decussation there is crossing of decussation of the two tracts, tectobulbar and tectospinal tracts. In the anterior part of the tegmental decussation, there is decussation of the rubrospinal tract. So these tracts decussate here towards the middle of the reticuli and anterior to the central gray matter. Then oculomotor nerve nucleus, from it the oculomotor nerve fibers arise. Because the oculomotor nerve has surface attachment to the anterior surface of the midbrain, therefore the fibers of the oculomotor nerve, they run forwards, medially, and then emerge from the medial sulcus of the crus cerebrus. So this is right course, intracerebral course of the right oculomotor nerve, and this is the intracerebral course of the left oculomotor nerve. Oculomotor nerve. So during its intracerebral course, that is course through the midbrain, the fibers of the oculomotor nerve arise from the nucleus of the oculomotor nerve. These fibers run forwards and medially, traverses through the medial part of the reticulus and traverses through the medial most part of the substantia nigra, and here on the medial surface of each crus cerebrus there is a medial sulcus or oculomotor sulcus, through which the oculomotor nerve they appear externally. So this will be the surface attachment of the oculomotor nerve. Now here just behind the medial end of the substantia nigra on each side, medial to the oculomotor nerve fibers, here there is a nucleus. Known as the nucleus of tractus peduncularis. Nucleus of the tractus peduncularis. It is located in the tegmentum, just behind the medial end of the substantia nigra, medial to the intracerebral course of the oculomotor nerve. Now, this nucleus is not the nucleus of tractus peduncularis. It is only present in 30% of the cases. Only present in 30% of the individual. In 70% it is absent. Now, this nucleus of tractus peduncularis, its afferent fibers arise from the optic tract. You know, optic nerve crossed, partially crossed in optic chiasma, and next to optic chiasma are right and left optic tracts. So afferent fibers arise from the optic tract, which is visual pathway, the afferent fibers, and they relay in the nucleus of tractus peduncularis. And from this nucleus, efferent fibers arise. Efferent fibers arise, and they relay in the oculomotor nerve nucleus. Oculomotor nerve nucleus. What are the connections of this nucleus of the tractus peduncularis, which is present only in 30% of the individuals? It is connected with the optic tract, through which its afferent fibers arise, and these afferent fibers originating from the optic tract register on the nucleus peduncularis, and from this nucleus peduncularis fibers arise comprising of efferent fibers, and these fibers then register in the oculomotor nerve nuclei. Now, the exact function of this nucleus we do not know, but when the eyeball is enucleated, when eyeball is removed, enucleated, this nucleus atrophy. Atrophy and disappear when the eyeballs are removed. So this was about the nucleus of the tractus peduncularis, which is present only in 30% of the individuals. Then anterolateral to the central grammator, here there is medial longitudinal fasciculus on each side. Medial longitudinal bundle or fasciculus. Fasciculus means tract. Medial longitudinal bundle or medial longitudinal fasciculus. Now, medial longitudinal bundle present throughout the midbrain, throughout the brainstem. Medial ligatural fasciculus or medial ligatural bundle. It is a compact bundle of nerve fibers. In the upper part of the medial ligatural bundle, posterolateral and close to the upper end of the cerebral aqueduct, upper end of the cerebral aqueduct. So among the fibers of this medial ligatural bundle, there is a nucleus. Amongst the fibers of the upper end of the medial ligatural bundle, which lie close to the upper end or initial part of the cerebral aqueduct, in the medial ligatural bundle there is a nucleus. Embedded up among the fibers of medial ligatural bundle. It is known as the interstitial nucleus of Cajal. Interstitial nucleus of Cajal. It is present among the nerve fibers of the upper end of the medial ligatural bundle. It is not present here at the lower level, but just to explain, I have drawn it. It is at the uppermost part of the cerebral aqueduct. Suppose this is cerebral aqueduct crossing through the midbrain. And the cerebral aqueduct is surrounded by the central gray matter, a longitudinal section. So here will be the interstitial nucleus of Cajal, located amongst the fibers of medial longitudinal bundle. Now, lateral to the cerebral aqueduct, central gray matter, is the reticular formation on each side. Reticular formation, bundle of nerve fibers and reticular nuclei. Lateral to the central gray matter in the tegmentum of the midbrain at the level of superior calculus is bundle of nerve fibers and nuclei. This is known as the reticular formation. On each side. Reticular formation of the midbrain. So remember, the cerebral aqueduct, the central gray matter, the medial longitudinal bundle, reticular formation, these are present throughout the midbrain. So we are talking just about the infrastructure of the upper half of the midbrain. So we have included this structure here. Mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve is also present throughout the brainstem and upper two-thirds of the spinal cord. Their location will change here and there. So anterolateral to the central gray matter in the tegment of the midbrain is the medial longitudinal bundle or the medial longitudinal fasciculus, bundle of nerve fibers, and in the upper end of the midbrain, close to the upper end of the cerebral aqueduct, here amongst the fibers of medial longitudinal bundle, there is a nucleus called interstitial nucleus of Cajal. So, then lateral to the central gray matter is the reticular formation, which is also present throughout the brainstem, but its location changes. So at the level of superior calculus, this will be the location of reticular formation, and number of nerve fibers with reticular nuclei are present. This structure we will discuss later on in detail. Now here, behind the lateral part of the substantia nigra, here there is a curved band of white. There is a white matter, curved band of white matter. On each side, there is a curved band of white matter. Now this curved band of white matter located behind the lateral most part of the substantia nigra, extending laterally downwards and medially. This band comprises of ascending tracts, sensory tracts. Now what are these sensory tracts? This lateral most is known as the lateral lemniscus. Lateral lemniscus. Then next to it is the lateral spinothalamic tract. And next to it is the trigeminal lemniscus. Trigeminal lemniscus. This last one is known as the medial lemniscus. So these are the 4 sensory tracts: ascending are sensory tracts. Same is on this side, from lateral to medial side, lateral lemniscus. Then there is a lateral spinothalamic tract. Then there is a trigeminal lemniscus, and the most medial one is the medial lemniscus. This curved band of white one, comprising of these ascending or sensory tracts. Now, what are the functions of these tracts? So, number 1, lateral lemniscus. The lateral spinothalamic tract. Lateral spinothalamic tract or lemniscus are simply known as spinal tract. Then there is trigeminal lemniscus. And the 4th one is the medial lemniscus. So these are the 4 lemnisci or ascending or sensory tracts located in the tegmentum of the midbrain. These are present both at the level of superior colliculi and inferior colliculi, where we will discuss later on. Now you can see, more easy to remember, most laterally is the lateral lemniscus and most medial is the medial lemniscus. And then lateral spinothalamic tract close to the lateral lemniscus, and then trigeminal and medial lemniscus. Now these sensory tracts, they carry which sensation? The lateral lemniscus is an auditory pathway, hearing. Part of the hearing pathway, auditory pathway. So carry sound waves to the auditory center. Then there is a lateral spinothalamic tract. It carries pain and thermal sensation from the body. Then the trigeminal lemniscus. You know, trigeminal nerve is the sensory to the face. Motor nerve supply the face is facial nerve, and the sensory nerve supply is the 5th cranial nerve, trigeminal nerve, and carries sensation from the face. So pain and thermal sensation from face area. Trigeminal lemniscus carries same sensations, pain and thermal sensations. From face area only. That is pain and thermal sensation, lateral spinal tract from rest of the body. And the trigeminal lemniscus, pain and thermal sensation from the face. And medial lemniscus, it carry pressure, touch, and proprioception. Proprioceptive sensations, pressure sensation, touch sensation, and proprioceptive sensation. Proprioceptive sensation is the sensation from joints, tendons, ligaments, etc. Joints. So these are the four sensory tracts located in the tegmentum of the midbrain at the level of superior colliculi. They are also present at the level of inferior colliculi. Then the most posterior part of the midbrain at this level, at the level of superior colliculi, is the tectum. So because this is section at the level of superior colliculi, so here will be the nuclei of superior colliculi. This is nucleus of superior colliculi. One on each side in the tectal region. Superior colliculi, inside are nuclei, nucleus of the superior colliculi, and on each side. And anterolateral to it, here is the pretectal nucleus, one on right side and one on left side. In the tectal region, suppose this is tectal region. So these are pretectal nuclei. Pretectal nucleus. Pretectal nucleus. Now the nucleus of superior colliculi. Nucleus of superior colliculi. On each side, receive information from eye. Receive information from eyes. Therefore, these nuclei are in charge of visual reflexes. Visual reflexes. And then next is the pretectal nuclei. Located in the tectum at the level of superior colliculus, anterolateral to the nucleus of superior colliculus. These are responsible for pupillary constriction. Impulses from these pretectal nuclei, they are for pupillary constriction. When one pretectal nucleus is stimulated, pupil of both eyes will constrict. When one pretectal nucleus is stimulated, pupil of both eyes. When one pretectal nucleus is stimulated, pupil of both eyes will constrict. because they are connected to both a danger Westphal nuclei of oculomotor nerve, parasympathetic, a danger Westphal nuclei of oculomotor nerve. A danger Westphal nucleus is the parasympathetic nucleus of the oculomotor nerve. In response to parasympathetic stimulation, the pupil will constrict. And you know, in response to sympathetic stimulation, the pupil will dilate. So because periaqueductal nucleus is connected to the vestibular nuclei of both sides, therefore pupil of both eyes will constrict. These nuclei we will discuss later on in detail, the tactile nuclei, which are superior inferior colliculi and periaqueductal nuclei. So these were the internal features of the midbrain at the level of superior colliculus, or internal features of the midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus. So you have seen the differences are only in the tegmentum. Now what is the internal structure of the midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus, or lower half of the midbrain? Now this diagram shows a section through the lower half of the midbrain at the level of superior colliculus. So this is the dorsal aspect, this is the ventral aspect. So this is superior colliculus. Sorry, not superior, inferior colliculus. To inferior colliculi. Now from before backward, this is crus cerebrus, right and left side, and behind the crus cerebri on each side is the substantia nigra. Crus cerebri, and behind it substantia nigra. So the crus cerebri and substantia nigra of the upper half of the midbrain continue downwards in the lower half of the midbrain also. And there is no structural difference in crus cerebri and substantia nigra throughout the whole extent of the midbrain. Then behind the substantia nigra is the tegmentum, which is continuity of the tegmentum of the midbrain from upper half into the lower half, and still behind is the tectum. The structural differences are in the tectum, in the tectal region, and in the tegmentum of the midbrain both upper level and lower level. So the tegmentum of the midbrain is traversed by the cerebral aqueduct in the center. The cerebral aqueduct of the midbrain upper half continue downwards into the lower half also, lined by ependema, and through it the cerebrospinal fluid flows, and it connects the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle. The cerebral aqueduct is again ensheathed by a layer of gray matter known as the central gray matter. Central gray matter or periaqueductal gray matter. Now, in the central gray matter of the lower half of the midbrain, anterolateral to the cerebral aqueduct in the central gray matter is the trochlear nerve nucleus on each side. In the central gray matter, ventrolateral to the cerebral aqueduct. Trochlear nerve nucleus. In the upper half of the midbrain, at this level was oculomotor nerve nucleus. And in the lower half, at this level, anterolateral to the cerebral aqueduct within the central gray matter is trochlear nerve nucleus. Then again in the central gray matter, lateral to the cerebral aqueduct is the sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve along with its tract on each side. Sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve. In my first lecture, I told you that the sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve is an elongated nucleus which extends throughout the brainstem and even continue into the upper 2 or 3 segments of the spinal cord. So this nucleus is cut in the central gray matter lateral to the cerebral aqueduct in upper half of the midbrain, and again it is cut here in the central gray matter lateral to the cerebral aqueduct in the lower half of the midbrain. Now, in front of the central gray matter and behind the level of interpeduncular fossa, here there is decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle. The fibers of right inferior cerebral peduncle decussate with the fibers of the left superior cerebellar peduncle. So here is decussation of superior cerebellar peduncle. Decussation of superior cerebellar peduncle. In the upper half of the midbrain, anterior to the central gray matter and dorsomedial to the red nuclei is the tegmental decussation. But here in the lower half of the midbrain, anterior to the central gray matter is the decussation of superior cerebellar peduncles. Now, as you know, this is a section through the midbrain. superior colliculi, inferior colliculi, midbrain traversed by cerebral aqueduct, and pons and medulla oblongata, and behind the midbrain, behind the pons and upper part of the medulla oblongata is the cerebellum. Now cerebellum is connected to the midbrain by a pair of superior cerebellar peduncles. Superior cerebellar peduncle. And the right and left superior cerebellar peduncles, they enter the midbrain below the inferior colliculus, and inside the fibers of the right and left superior cerebral peduncle, they cross each other. So this is decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle. Then in the tegmentum ventrolateral to the central grammator on each side is the medial longitudinal fasciculus. Medial longitudinal fasciculus or bundle. Same structure here in the upper half, medial longitudinal bundle. In the tegmentum of upper half of the midbrain, continue downwards through the lower half of the midbrain, and it is cut again here. So medial longitudinal bundle. Now lateral to the central grammator in the tegmentum is the reticular formation. On each side. Reticular formation. So a mixture of nerve fibers and gray matter on each side. Is the reticular formation. So the reticular formation traversing the upper half of the midbrain continue downwards into the lower half of the midbrain. So in the lower half of the midbrain, again this is reticular formation in the tegmentum lateral to the central grammator. Then again there is a white band of fibers on each side. It extends from lateral to medial side. This white band are 4 sensory or ascending tracts in the form of Lemniscal. Same 4 Lemniscal white band which traverses the upper half of the midbrain, continue downwards into the lower half of the midbrain. 4 tracts. That is lateral lemniscus, Then spinal lemniscus. Then trigeminal lemniscus. And last one is the medial lemniscus. So these are the four lemnisci, collectively known as the lemniscal system. Same four tracts, sensory tracts, in the upper half and lower half of the midbrain. We have already discussed in detail their function. So just to revise, lateral lemniscus is part of auditory pathway. Hearing information is conducted through it. Then there is spinal lemniscus. Spinal lemniscus comprises of two tracts, that is ventral and lateral spinothalamic tract. Lateral and ventral spinothalamic tracts, they join together to form spinal lemniscus. Now the spinothalamic tract or spinal lemniscus, they carry the pain, temperature sensations from the body. Next to it is trigeminal lemniscus. You know, trigeminal nerve is sensory to the face. So this trigeminal lemniscus, it carry pain and temperature from face area. Spinal lemniscus, that is ventral and lateral spinothalamic tract, they carry pain and temperature sensation from the whole body except face. But the trigeminal lemniscus carry pain and thermal sensation from the face area only. And medial lemniscus is for touch, pressure, and proprioceptive impulses. So these were the four ascending sensory tracts on each side of the tegmentum of the midbrain behind the lateral part of the substantia nigra. Same tracts which continue upwards will be cut at the superior level also. Next, because this section is at the level of inferior calculus, so here under the inferior calculi will be the nucleus of inferior calculus on each side. Nucleus of inferior colliculus on each side. In the upper half of the section of the midbrain, we have seen superior calculi, so here are nuclei of the superior calculi. And in the lower half will be the inferior nuclei of the inferior calculi located under the inferior calculi. In the upper level, in the tectum of the midbrain, apart from nuclei of the superior calculi, there were pretectal nuclei also, but here there are no pretectal nuclei. Now, these are the trochlear nerve nuclei. From the nuclei of the trochlear nerve fibers arise. Now here between the, just below the inferior calculi, there is an area known as the superior medullary velum. Superior medullary velum. Now, the fibers of the trochlear nerve, which originate from the trochlear nerve nuclei, instead of running forwards, these fibers run backwards around the central gray matter and enter the superior medullary vellum. These are the intracerebral fibers, intracerebral course of the trochlear nerve. Right side and left side, again the trochlear nerve run backwards around the central gray matter, enter the superior medullary vellum. Trochlear nerves. So when the right and left trochlear nerves, they enter the superior medullary vellum, they cross. So the trochlear nerve is unique in that it is the only cranial nerve which has surface attachment on the posterior surface of the brain, that is midbrain. All the cranial nerve, they arise either from the ventral aspect or ventrolateral aspect of the brain stem, except trochlear nerve which leave the midbrain through its posterior surface. Now here at upper level you can see these are the oculomotor nerve nuclei, and from the nuclei oculomotor nerve fibers arise which run forwards and medially through the red nucleus, substantia nigra, and they leave the midbrain upper half from the medial surface of the crus cerebrus. So this was the course of oculomotor nerve in upper half of the midbrain. But here course of the trochlear nerve arise from trochlear nerve nuclei. Instead of running forwards, they run backwards, enter the superior medullary vellum where they cross completely and then emerges from the posterior surface of the midbrain. You know, the optic nerve partially decussate and trochlear nerve completely decussate from each other. The oculomotor nerve is in the central gray matter, anterolateral to the cerebral aqueduct in the upper half of the midbrain. So here in this section you can see here, this is the cerebral aqueduct and it is surrounded by the central gray matter. This is level of superior colliculus. And this is level of inferior colliculus. Now in the central gray matter, anterolateral to the cerebral aqueduct, at the level of superior colliculus is the oculomotor nerve nucleus. This is a longitudinal section through the brainstem. And again, anterolateral to the cerebral aqueduct in the central gray matter, at the level of inferior colliculus, is the trochlear nerve nucleus. Oculomotor nerve nucleus, and this is trochlear nerve nucleus. And you know, anterolateral to the cerebral aqueduct at the level of superior colliculus in the midbrain, here is the red nucleus. And the red nucleus is absent at the lower half. So this was a longitudinal view of the midbrain showing location of the oculomotor nerve and trochlear nerve nuclei. Now under the inferior colliculus nuclei of the inferior colliculi on each side. Now, as I told you that the nucleus of superior colliculi are in charge of visual reflexes, while nuclei of the inferior colliculi, these nuclei are in charge of auditory reflexes. Not visual pathway and auditory pathway, but reflex pathways. Superior colliculi in charge of visual reflexes, while the inferior colliculi in charge of auditory reflexes. So this was the internal feature of the lower half of the midbrain. Now you have seen that both upper half, lower half comprise of crus cerebri in front, substantia nigra, tegmentum and tectum. Same is the case here. Then crus cerebri structure in upper half and lower half of the midbrain is uniform, no change, no structural changes. Second, substantia nigra structure in the lower half of the midbrain, lower half of the midbrain and upper half of the midbrain also same. There is no structural difference, uniform structure. In both crus cerebri and substantia nigra, they are separated by interpeduncular fossa throughout the midbrain. Then at both levels, the midbrain is traversed by cerebral aqueduct, just like shown in this diagram, cerebral aqueduct. Cerebral aqueduct. So it is cut at both levels. Another structure, the central gray matter, it covers the cerebral aqueduct and continue from the upper half of the midbrain to the lower half, the central gray matter following the cerebral aqueduct. Next, the medial longitudinal bundle is also traversing the whole midbrain, upper half and lower half. Reticular formation is also traversing the whole midbrain, upper half and lower half. No structural differences. Similarly, the four sensory tracts, Lemniscal system, is traversing through the whole midbrain. So this is upper half and lower half, same four tracts are traversing through it. Then the mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve is a elongated nucleus. So the sensory nucleus and tract of the trigeminal traverses throughout the midbrain, therefore it is present both in upper half and lower half of the midbrain. Now, what are the structural differences in tegmentum and tectum? In case of upper half of the midbrain, there is tegmental decussation just in front of the central gray matter, while in the lower half of the midbrain, it is the decussation of the superior cerebral peduncle. Then this is one difference. Then in the upper half, in the central gray matter, anterolateral to the aqueduct is the oculomotor nucleus on each side, while in the lower half, in the central gray matter, anterolateral to the cerebral aqueduct is the trochlear nucleus on each side. In the upper half, this is the course of the oculomotor nerve, which run forwards, and in the lower half, this is the course of the trochlear nerve, which run backwards. Then next, collicular level, tectal region. In the upper half, there are nuclei of the superior colliculi and pretectal nuclei, while in the lower half, there are nuclei of the inferior colliculi. Pretectal nuclei are not present at this level. So these two diagrams will help you to describe the internal features of the midbrain. The easy method to learn all these features is that you draw the diagrams again and again and label it. This will help you to remember the internal features of the midbrain, upper half and lower half. So thank you very much. Keep learning and please subscribe. Thank you very much.